Hey guys, it's Brad Lewis again for our readings this week on school choice in theory and practice. Basically, our readings on vouchers, charter schools, and whether or not they have a positive impact, obviously, on students and even on public schools due to competition and things like that. Before we get started, I think it's important, um, at least for me, to be open and honest um, about my leanings, my bias. I am a strong proponent of public schools, and in that, an opponent of vouchers, charters, things like that. I tried to make sure in my readings this week, and we've had a couple others leaning this way, that I read with an open mind, that I make sure I am aware of those leanings and my predisposition um, on that, and just am able to kind of try to be as analytical and even keeled as possible about it. But I think, when we have biases, they seep in, and only thing when I was in the classroom, I always felt like the only thing we could really do um, is to try to make sure people are as aware of those biases as possible. Um, Having said that, there were some readings this week that I kind of liked. The discussion of vouchers um, and using them by lottery. I think the reading was one by Matthew Chingus and Paul Peterson, and they talk about the college acceptance and the ideas of vouchers giving a little bit more freedom of choice to attend. Um, the way they were describing it with that voucher system and that lottery system uh, was something I thought sounded similar to the system in the Netherlands, where they have kind of almost a 50-50 mix of public and private, but there are private schools get government funding as well, and there's a lot more choice in it, and as long as you follow a set curriculum, you can have school. But that sense of ownership that it gave the kids, I could see that being a positive. Um, I could see a benefit in, especially in who they found had the greatest benefit were African American students, even more so than Hispanics. I could see that benefit if we think back to some of the readings we had in earlier weeks about the pressure, the idea of acting white, the things that went to it and with it, um, and the peer pressure to fit in. That if you're excelling, you are acting white. You may be selling out. These type of things. Access to a private school um, away from that setting, I could see having an impact. So that was an area in the readings that I thought maybe softened my stance a little bit towards vouchers. I could kind of get behind seeing, or at least hearing the thoughts on the idea for that with some restrictions. I was curious in the reading um, as to whether or not, if you took vouchers and you had a public school and they went to a private school, would they still have to go by the same guidelines? Because that's one of my huge arguments against charter schools. Um, Several of our readings discussed having um, charter schools, and that they were more effective, and that they made the public schools better where they were in competition. And I just think that that's like an apples and oranges comparison, because um, charter schools don't have to abide by everything. We had readings by the American Federation for Children, and talking about the cases in North Carolina and the groups that are behind the Walton Group and foundations, and these groups that are pushing for charters, but they're not expected to do what public schools do. Um, They don't necessarily follow idea. They don't uh, have to have a lot of these policies for keeping kids in school. They can kick kids out at will, which results in your most difficult kids to teach being gone. Um, I see that a lot when I was at North Brunswick as a high school, now at Williston. The start of the year, enrollment will be a little low. As the year progresses, we will get more and more kids that return from Roger Bacon, now Glow in Wilmington. Why are they returning? They got in a fight, they did something, the school has kicked them out. The public school's not going to get away with that. I'm not going to be able to kick a kid out, tell a kid can't come back because they get in a fight. Not without significant bodily injury, not without a weapon, things like that. I'm going to have to serve kids that, in all actuality, our public schools aren't fit to serve. Kids that are not mobile, deaf, don't have any speech, can't feed themselves. They're coming to my school, and we have to figure out a way to serve them. And they're taking up a tremendous amount of resources. A lot of these charters don't have those kids, so that's a big problem for me in the whole charter school debate. And I was wondering with vouchers, and I looked in our readings, but I couldn't get a sense. I got the impression from our readings that maybe that wasn't the case, that the standards would be even. But that would be something I would want to know. I think if there was going to be a voucher program that I could get behind, or that we could get behind as far as school choice, all the schools need to be expected to provide the same services and be open to the same kids, not a situation where I think the fear is that the kids who are already intrinsically motivated, that have family supports, that find ease in being a student in an academic setting, those kids are going to move on to the public schools. Those kids are going to have parents who, pursue the lottery, who pursue school choice and the things around it. The public schools will be left with those other ones, the fighters, the kids with a lot more emotional, physical, whatever disabilities and issues. And that's not fair. It's not equal. It's not good or healthy for the kids. Um, Either group of kids, I think. The kids that are going uh, to the private schools and kind of fleeing from that, and the kids who are left behind. I don't think it's good for either group. So, the research that they showed us really doesn't convince me that students are going to do any better. We've in a lot of our readings, Ravitch, and things, you see that on the one hand, there's no significant statistical advantage to a charter school. Um, they want to talk about college acceptance rates, the scores of the public schools improved from the competition. Um, I don't know. I'm just not buying it. It just seemed very weak, very flimsy evidence compared to some of the other stuff we've seen on the backside. And we had readings about the kind of the donations, the political donations in North Carolina and other groups, of the pay for play, basically, where it's not research that is backing policy or inspiring policy, it's money. And for instance, Roger Bacon, the people who own the school also own the curriculum that the school uses, which they buy from. They creating a system of money. That's a dangerous, dangerous thing. Living in a democracy, the idea of public schools disappearing, of a standard that has to be dangerous, dangerous thing in my opinion. Uh, to allow private schools, religious schools, things like that maybe wouldn't have those standards, um, which is kind of where my bias comes from, my fear comes from, and so it's something I would want to see addressed if vouchers were going to come about. I don't know that I would ever be a proponent of charter schools, um, but with vouchers, with giving the parents some choice, there'd have to be a lot of other things that I need to make myself more aware before I could kind of become a fan, or some restrictions I would want to see in light of some of the things I talked about earlier. Um, I think it is an issue that public schools are dealing with. I agree with the writings at the lower level. It's even more. Roger Bacon, for instance, doesn't have a high school, so that's not a competition to that level. It's middle schools, elementary schools that are really kind of dealing with this and having to sell themselves to the public that they are, uh, in fact, just as effective. Um, the fact that these schools don't have to have licensed teachers, that the oversight's not the same. The fact, on my own, of working at a high school, that the Roger Bacon students I saw come in were generally, if we talk about it as a whole, on average, far behind in mathematics, far behind in uh, social awareness, ability to fit in, that type of stuff at a high school. I mean, our Roger Bacon students were very high needs, um, to do that, and really, really struggled. They a lot of times they would come and the parents would want them in honors, you know, math one, math two, and they were in no way ready for that at the high school level, and the parents would often have trouble with the school, and reckoning the fact that their child had always gotten A's and now they weren't. Um, and there were exceptions. Some of every once in a while you'd have a top kid that was just the top kid you got, but as a whole, they really struggled compared to kids coming from our normal feeders, more predominant feeders. So the readings were pretty interesting this week. I didn't really see anything that made me change my mind. I'm still very leery of what charter schools and vouchers would mean for our democracy. I'm still very leery of special interests and the monetizing of education, the profit, making it something that could be profit driven. I think, if you look at what that's done to cable news, the news is horrible. And it's because we made it for profit, we made it for ratings. I worry about education. If you try to make a profit doing education, it's not something that's meant to turn a profit. That's not the purpose. And so I don't think you can run it like a business for all those people that want choice and privatization. Because I think school choice, in large part, is a mask, and one of our readings mentioned this earlier, uh, to ease us to privatization, to take education out of the public sphere. And that would not be good for education or the country. So that's just my thoughts, my opinions. Love to hear what everybody else has to say. Look forward to seeing everybody's responses this week. Thanks.